And welcome to the Startup Innovators podcast. I'm really excited today. I've got Zak Holdsworth in the house. How you doing today, Zak?
Doing very well, thank you.
That's great. Zak is the co-founder of Hint Health, which is a cool company. And it's so exciting for me because I met Zak, gosh, close to 14 years ago when he was a business development guy, relatively fresh out of Stanford grad school and from his hometown of New Zealand. Zak, I don't know if you ever thought when you were in New Zealand and you came over to the United States, you'd be changing the U.S. healthcare system, kind of a big vision there.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, what my dad got the first computer in our town, so I'd
Yeah.
always kind of had a dream of going to Silicon Valley. So I think that part of that part was maybe surprising, but felt fulfilling in that respect. But yeah, transforming U.S. healthcare from first principles. No, that one was a surprise to me as well.
Well, we're going to touch base with all of that. I'm going to do a quick intro just to kind of gear it up. Again, you and I met a long time ago when you're doing biz development work for a company called Wellness FX, which was a little bit before its time. And I was one of the premier clients. Curtis Feeney, who was one of the lead investors, got me hooked into it. And I instantly got it. Wow, this idea that you could build a software platform that had all this high level analytical lab work and that you could have specialty doctors interpret that. Maybe AI would be doing it today, pulling it all together and looking at a holistic picture of your health, and then ultimately giving you the opportunity to identify either health trends or things going on in your personal body. And you could then either through supplements, medicine, lifestyle changes, et cetera, beat that progression curve early on. And now we're 15 years down the road and all this stuff is archived and people go to the doctors and things are on my chart and systems like that. So, but you were there in the very beginning, and we're going to talk in a minute about how that experience actually was the impetus that led you to this big idea for what you're doing at Hint Health. So a little bit of a bio, as we just said. Zak came from New Zealand, went to Stanford, worked in health tech and business development. And he has a co-founder, Graham Melcher, and they zeroed on this big ambition, which was to kind of change the traditional fee-for-service primary care model that we see pretty persistent here in the United States with a membership model that restores that doctor-patient relationship, that intimacy, which is what it's really all about, right? It's about a doctor getting to know you and your family, understanding the idiosyncrasies of you, and having that ease of connecting with them and building that relationship and bettering the health of your family. And I think that's really exciting. And in many cases, trying to do that in the absence of the insurance middleman, I guess I should say. For anyone out there, whether you're an independent person, you have health insurance, or you're a parent with children, you're doing this for your family, the health insurance model is just out of control today. It just seems like out-of-pocket maximums are growing much higher than the pace of inflation. Deductibles tend to be going up. Even with deductibles, as we talked a little bit earlier, there tends to be a fee for service that's even on top of that half of the time. So you go see your doctor, you've met your deductible, and you still, on top of that, are paying 100, 150, 200, depending upon your plan, which is adding to that out-of-pocket maximum, which is becoming so large that you're never going to meet it. And then when you do go find a doctor that you really want to meet, that doctor may not be on the insurance coverage, and then you've got to go to the second level, which is an out-of-pocket doctor, where you have a whole nother deductible and maximum, which becomes ridiculous at that point. And if you really want to see that doctor, you end up just paying cash in the first place. Let's start off by talking about, what is the big problem that you identified 13 years ago? What was the impetus for you to say, let's go ahead and attempt to change this?
Yeah, I think the early days of Hint, we, actually going back to the Wellness FX days, I'd say that one of the kind of insights we had, one of the things we learned about was how there were so many interesting and different providers, healthcare providers, that were stepping away from the traditional fee-for-service system. And we often interacted with them at Wellness FX because we would try to contract with them to be part of our network, because they were the types of doctors, functional medicine doctors or traditional doctors or non-traditional doctors, the types that were sort of predisposed to being valuable in the Wellness FX network. And so we got exposed to the sort of alternative to the traditional fee for service through Wellness FX. I'd say though that when we kind of started peeling the layers back on the sort of fundamental reason the system is broken, what I'd say kind of zeroed in on is almost like two axioms. The first axiom was that, the reason the system is broken is because of all the perverse incentives and just the lack of transparency, lack of price transparency, the 30, 40, 50 cents on the dollar of administrative overhead that is attributable to the insurance fee for service infrastructure and that chassis,
Hmm.
and how a lot of the innovation in healthcare was being layered on top of that. And so one of the insights was like, okay, well, in principle, if we're going to transform healthcare, it probably can't be another abstraction layer on top of that traditional fee for service model. That's probably pretty safe assumption, right? The second assumption is that in order to transform US healthcare, you probably need to fix primary care. There's no functioning healthcare system in the world that is highly functioning that doesn't have a highly functioning primary care and preventative system, and that the two of those things are related, and that the primary care system, the back of primary care, have been broken through the fee for service incentives and all the other stuff we talked about. So those became kind of axioms for us, which is, okay, if we're going to do a thing, probably that thing is not insurance based, and probably it has something to do with restoring integrity of primary care. And then back to those Wellness FX days, we kept being reminded of these different sort of types of providers that were doing things slightly differently. And we kept kind of running into this pattern. And where we kind of landed was we started to identify these doctors that were doing basically a membership based model. And it was very early days, but they were self attesting to being either direct primary care or like concierge providers.
Yeah.
And we kept, although it was sort of fringe at the time, much less so now, but 15 years ago, 13 years ago, it was very, very fringe. When we looked at what they were doing and you kind of peeled the layers back on their underlying business, well, it was natural. It was like there's no perverse incentives. Their incentive was like, keep my population healthy, because then I'll have a healthy population. It'll be less complicated for me to manage, right? So you had that incentive. There was price transparency, right? They'd put their price on their website, and there was very little to no administrative overhead in what they were doing. And so we kept coming across these doctors that were, and by the way, the doctors actually loved it, and the patients loved it. Their patients were 100 net promoter score, right? Like they were just crazy, or maybe not quite 100, but very high. And
Yeah.
so we were faced with this sort of, I guess, like a conundrum in that, wow, this is actually looks like the answer, but it's really, 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 really early. And so we just thought, you know what, let's just start building and see what happens. And 13 years later, we are where we're at. And as tech guys, we started building tech to support these clinicians. And, we are at, now, I think now the market is, the timing in the market is now, right? Like this movement is expanding very quickly now. But 13
Yeah.
years ago, there was like less than 100 of these doctors, I think. And so we looked a little bit insane. But now I think we look less insane, but it's taken a while to get here.
Well, you've had this information through social media and YouTube, where you have guys like Gary Brecka and Huberman, and pick your soup du jour, basically. And I would consider them alternative doctors, alternative scientists, alternative healthcare experts, who are pulling that information, and it's very, very important. And to some degree, the insurance segment still does not include them.
Yeah.
So that becomes an issue. And that's where Wellness FX, I think, really brought kind of the holistic approach to it. Except the difference was they said, let's back it by data, and a lot of data. And they were so early on with the same kind of lab tests that you could build that profile and have your doctor just subscribe, write you a script for Quest or LabCorp today and do the same thing. But it was pretty revolutionary there. And what I loved the most about it as a tech guy myself was this ability to have the software platform where you could go keep a record of everything that you've done. You could build that profile over many, many years. Of course, they were sold to Thorne, and now new things have happened. But I do love this idea. I had a concierge medical practice for my children when they were little, when they were very little kids. And we do something similar today. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're uncomfortable taking up somebody's time because of a fee for service model.
Yeah, all the time. And that's one of the reasons that people don't go to their doctor, because of their both the hassle and the fact they don't kind of have that deep trusted relationship. Yeah, so
Right, and the insurance companies have basically put the pressure on the physicians. They're limiting the amount of money that they can get per transaction, and so then it becomes more like a cattle call where they can only take a certain amount of people in for a day, and I love that idea of, okay, well, if I'm paying for the month, I don't have that guilt calling my doctor and spending more time on the phone, taking away from, their number of transactions they're getting every day because
often the
the
doctor
the
will,
agreement yeah, the agreement between patient and doctor is, "I will give you the time whenever you need it now," and
yeah.
it's you have a
And it's not
subscription
uncommon
model.
for our doctors to initiate. They'll say, they'll reach out to their customers saying, "Hey, how you doing? Did how are the meds going? Like whatever." And so it flips the script on that incentive, right? The incentive again is that the doctor um, is is a sort of trust, it's deep trusted relationship you form, and so it's two-way street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about the company itself, a little bit about like, who do you primarily serve? What are the big kind of differentiators or benefits that you've been able to acquire for these clients over the past couple of years?
Yeah, so where we started was, this is a new, if you think about what's the innovation in direct primary care, well, the innovation is not a clinical innovation, right? It's not like there's this new way to deliver great care. The innovation is really, there's not this new clinical insight. The innovation was actually more business model. If I change the business model, then all of the correct sort of clinical and patient and user experience decisions flow from that business model. And so we thought, why don't we build? And a lot at the time, a lot of the prospects that we kind of spoke to were running their business on basically spreadsheets. And so we thought, okay, why don't we build a system that is, allows them to, streamline that. So basically, we kind of built a membership management and payments platform to support these direct primary care and concierge groups. And that was where we started and kind of continued over time. What happened is our customers started working with employer groups, because employers, if you think about it, their costs are compounding at 12% a year. Their healthcare costs are compounding 12% a year, and it's actually accelerating. Like it was compounding 8%, and now it's compounding at 9. So it's actually an acceleration of the growth rate. So they're
Yeah.
starting to look for alternatives, and increasingly are looking towards direct primary care. They'll say, "Hey, we'll contract with the doctor or the network, and our employees will get access to this benefit for free, and there'll be benefits downstream for us from a cost and quality and outcome perspective." So that's increasingly happened. So we built the infrastructure to support kind of contracting with employers as a provider. We then built out the ability to power, basically networks. So we now support networks of these groups that are contracting with employers. And then we acquired our way into the EMR space. And since then, about 3 or 4 years ago, we acquired an EMR and have basically been integrating it into our product suite. And now it's like, pretty good and creating a lot of value for our customers. And so we have, onboarding, scheduling, payments, communications, clinical, ERX, lab, all the things, right? That allows a doctor to run their entire business across both billing, payment, enrollment, employee management, as well as clinical and reporting and communication. So that's kind of the technology product suite. I'd say there's a
Mhm.
couple of other things that we do at Hint. From the very early days, we made a pretty conscious decision. We want to contribute back to the community. So we
Okay.
host an annual conference called the Hint Summit, which is like their sort of direct primary care, direct care innovation conference. We'll be in April in Nashville next year if anyone wants to come. So that's a pretty fun
It's a great
event.
town.
Yeah, it's really fun. That's where we're doing it this year at the
Yeah.
Country Music Hall of Fame.
Plus
And then we all
Franklin, Tennessee is the place. That's
yeah,
so everybody's moving there. Yeah. It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
Beverly Hills of Tennessee.
Yeah, so that's going to be great. And then we also have what we call the boot camp, which is basically if you're wanting to launch a direct primary care clinic, you can come and join our boot camp for free, and we'll take you through a 10-week program from nothing to launched. We're putting dozens and dozens per month new clinicians launching through that program. And then the other thing we do is, because we now have a relatively substantial footprint, we've launched a network called Hint Connect, which allows brokers or employers to contract with our network at scale without having to go work with many independent clinics I can just work with one network and get access to all of the direct primary care clinics that are part of that network. So that's, I'd say, the kind of suite of tools and services that we've built to support the community.
So if you're, like you said, a company and you want to be part of this network and offer that,
Mhm.
but you're also providing a certain insurance carrier, obviously, for most plans. They usually just have one, or maybe they have a couple, depending upon the size of the organization. How does that work in conjunction with that? Because the insurance program is kind of a pay per service for in most cases. They contract out with these great doctors in your network and they say, well, it's going to be $50 a month or whatever it is per person. That's a flat fee. You get these services, but that, of course, you could use that to pay for through your HSA. And does that contribute towards the out of pocket cost expenses in network for these insurance companies? Or is it kind of, hey, that's a separate deal that you're going to do, but over the long term, it's going to be less expensive than just going and paying $150 every time you have to see your doctor and ask him a question?
So the answer to that is everything, between everything from it's totally standalone. An employer will say, I want to keep my plan as is, just independently running, and then I want to also purchase a direct primary care offering for my employees, all the way through to where I pay, sort of think of them, separate church and state, and I kind of keep them separated, all the way through to the other extreme, which is self-funded employers doing incredibly sophisticated plan design, where they will actually integrate direct primary care like natively into their benefit plan,
Hmm.
right? And actually have
Wow.
those direct primary care is integrated with their network design and their downstream referrals and their direct contracts and everything. And it's like deeply integrated. And then there's like flavors all the way through from left to the right.
Yeah.
Now, and you just mentioned HSA. Part of the big beautiful bill, there was a HSA provision which actually is very beneficial for direct primary care, where which is going to have like pretty profound impact. We think actually next year and beyond, because it comes online in 1/1.
Okay.
Where now there's a tax advantage way to have HSA dollars being used for direct primary care. So that's not a now thing, that's kind of coming. Yeah, and then Hint Connect is sort of helping work with typically forward thinking advisors or brokers that are looking for kind of either cost cutting or enhancements to their plans, because their
Yeah.
employee groups are just like, I can't keep compounding this at 12%. And so they'll often like work with us to implement the direct primary care component of that. We will make that turnkey for a small, medium, or large employer. And so we're collaborating with across the spectrum, I guess.
In that new, in the big beautiful bill, so to speak, are the HSA accounts still tied to, I know they're called high deductible HSA, but are they still tied to high deductible insurance plans? Because there was a lot of talk about everybody should have the ability to have an HSA. Then they could save essentially your own war chest to pay for bills down the road. Was that changed or is that still the same?
I'm actually, what I will say upfront is I'm not an expert on the regulatory stuff. I
Yeah.
tend to a little bit, my eyes glaze over with that stuff. I've got team members that are like experts in it. What I'll say though is that it is very favorable for a DPC. If you want to implement a
Mhm.
DPC plan,
Yeah.
it is a very favorable. Historically, it will have been it would have added complexity, because you will not have been able to pair certain HSA plans with DPC in a kind of compliant manner. Now you can, but the exact nuance of exactly what's happening, I kind of
Yeah.
glaze over some of that. I tend to, I mean, like just generally as an entrepreneur, I tend to like think mostly about the stuff which I can control.
Yeah.
And although we actually are able to help influence some of the things that are going on there, there's other people much smarter than me that are doing that work.
It's funny. We were talking earlier. You were mentioning first principles, and it's just the concept of first principles never really existed until, I mean, existed, but the public awareness of that term
Mhm.
I've discovered through podcasts, through listening to podcasts. Talk about first principles in the context of your business and how that made an impact.
Yeah, I'd say, first principles is a double-edged sword, because often what thinking about things from first principles will lead you to is it will lead you to being too early. I'd say I've been going through my lifetime having predictions about the future, and almost always I'm a little bit too early. And
Yeah.
I'd say that's the case with this business as well. I think in this case it's working out okay, but in other cases I was just simply too early. One
So
example of it,
what was the first principle thinking for this business?
well, again, like I sort of generally articulated that earlier, but the idea is that it's really those axioms I came up with, which is like, the first principled approach where if you want to transform US healthcare, and I'm not talking just like incrementally improve it 1%. I mean, there's a trillion or now $1.5 trillion of waste,
Yeah.
right? One way to think about this would be, okay, in theory, this innovation, right? Like if you have an innovation, in theory at scale, if you tend it to, in physics, exactly, it's a concept where you take a concept and then you tend, it's called tending it towards infinity, right? So if I tend, the idea of like everyone getting access to this specific healthcare innovation, and we could use wellness FX as an example. If everyone in America had access to wellness FX, um, you know, 300 million people sign up to wellness FX, I would argue that it will have had an impact, but it won't have eliminated $1 trillion of waste,
Hmm.
right? And so in that sort of first principle view, it has value, but it wouldn't be a transformative kind of action that will, at scale, transform US healthcare. So
Yeah.
when we were looking at this business, we were like, okay, what is a concept that, in principle, at scale, if you were to deploy it to everyone, what effects will it have on the system?
Yeah.
And the conclusion we came to with direct primary care is that it would become, at scale, if everyone had access to this innovation, it would be the sort of sand with which the pearl would form around, which would lead to broad scale healthcare transformation. Everyone had affordable access to primary care and was seeing their primary care doctor in a cost efficient way. And that doctor was actually doing their job, the full scope of what primary care could be. Not only would that impact the health of that individual in a way that was profound, would have profound downstream impacts, but it would also on their health, but it would also have profound impacts on the way that healthcare purchasing is provisioned downstream in secondary care and beyond. Because
Yeah.
that doctor's incentive is to figure out, okay, hang on, like maybe there's a more efficient cash way to do this. Maybe I'll contract with a local network that will give me price transparent cash rates. Maybe I can go
Gotcha.
upstream and work with this employer to help them re-architect that kind of like care navigation so that everyone saves. And so that if we apply it to this business, the kind of the thinking here is that if we were to give everyone access to this thing, it would have these ripple-on effects, which are somewhat deterministic. Like it's pretty obvious actually what will happen. The hard part is back channeling from, okay, 350 million people have access to this thing, down to like less than 0.01% of the doctors in the country are doing this today when we started. Then that's the part which is like, okay, well, that doesn't seem very realistic.
Yeah.
But it passes the sniff test on kind of this idea of a fundamental transformation as opposed to an incremental one. And so our mission like that became the foundation of our vision and mission statement. So our formalized vision statement, is to redesign the US healthcare system to enable easy access to high quality, affordable care. So that's like a 2-decade North Star. And then the mission became to enable, empower direct care and direct primary care and make it the new standard. And so that's what we've been working on for a decade. And that's, for example, why we do the Hint Summit, why we do boot camp, why we
Yeah.
build software that's affordable for these groups, why we help, have the network, which unlocks demand. All these things fall away from that initial kernel of an idea.
Do you think the kind of the problem related to limited access to primary care, is it that because all insurance plans have some level of primary care, but it's a fee for service, and then you've got to apply it against a deductible, and maybe that's too expensive for people, or maybe people feel like, hey, I'm generally healthy, like the mentality of so many people, particularly when you're younger, is I feel good, I'm generally healthy, I work out, I feel great, I eat healthy, there's nothing wrong with me, so I'm not going to spend the extra money. If I was paying every month, I would just take advantage of it. But if I'm like, I feel good, I don't want to go in there and spend $500 and then they're going to do all this testing and then I'm just going to spend all this money right now. Is the constraint a psychological one? Is it the insurance company is making it too expensive with the whole deductibles and out of pocket system? What's really preventing people from really going to the doctor and learning where they have potential issues in their health that they can address early on?
I mean, I think it's all of the above, right?
Yeah.
But I would say the primary one is that for the most part, when you try to schedule with your doctor, it's a complicated process and it will typically take weeks to get in or months in some cases.
Yeah.
And then yes, you have the unknown about how much, like for you, for most, for if you're a little bit, more affluent, then the money part is maybe less friction. But most people, like the majority of people, have less money in their savings account
Mhm.
than a deductible.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
there's not
Yeah.
like a made up stat. That's like a real thing. Like that's
Yeah.
like a shocking thing. Where so there'd be like the fear of like engaging with the system at all.
Yeah.
I'd also, and so there's definitely something there. I'd also add that, there's just something about the sort of nature of the relationship that you have with someone that you're in this transactional thing with, right? Where it's like every interaction is a transaction, which with friction and complexity and fear and like unknown and everything. If you replace that with every interaction is this interaction with this deeply trusted, almost like sacred relationship. Like one of the analogies I like to give is that, you hear this a lot when someone has like a mother or a father or a brother or sister or a close friend that's a doctor.
Yeah.
And they will call their doctor for, they'll just like have a sniff and they'll call their mum, or like they'll or they'll just feel worried about something. They'll call their dad or their brother, hey, And so the analogy I like is that often in a direct primary care type construct where you've built this trusted relationship, that's what ends up happening. People will actually engage for almost nothing. Then in some cases, actually that anxiety, let's say, is actually like a mental health thing. And actually that doctor will know that and they will treat it. And often they'll treat it by just being present. Right. And that's almost enough to deal with the anxiety. And so
Yeah.
like it just changes the paradigm in such a fundamental way that almost all the things you talk about, even if you're a 22-year-old young, healthy, athletic person, or maybe I want to talk to my doctor about optimizing my performance. Right. That was me when I was at the Wellness Effects thing. Like I wasn't talking to these doctors about, my cholesterol. I was talking to them about like, how do I be a more competent athlete? But
Yeah.
that's just, you're just down that same path of like thinking about your health, caring about it, having it be a part of your life. And when you remove all those barriers, you change the dynamic, then wonderful things happen along the continuum of life.
So let's talk. Okay, so we got this great solution. I know it's being implemented from the physician side. They're purchasing the platform, and obviously their goal is to provide better, consistent, worry-free, frictionless care in a way that's still profitable for them, and that's all positive for the patients.
Mhm.
Where's the company today? I'm sure there are a lot of hurdles because whenever you're trying to do something different and you're battling the insurance monster that's always weighing down on the physicians. Where are you guys today? I know we talked, you've had a lot of growth and your growth is still very, very strong. Where are you? Where do you expect to be in the next, 5, 10 years? And what's your vision for where this is going over the next period of time?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of just sort of high level statistics,
Yeah.
there are, about 80 people at Hint now. Uh, and pretty significant investment we're making on the R&D kind of technology R&D side. So close to half of that is in sort of R&D. We are billions of dollars of going through the platform on behalf of our customers. We've got thousands of customers, more than 1 million active members. There's relatively significant revenue. We're about I'd say we're actually just about to cross into profitability, which is a nice place to be.
Right.
And yeah, and yeah, so it's those are some of the high level statistics.
Because institutionally funded, venture funded,
Yeah,
or
we've raised along the way we raised like seed round and then a VC round and then kind of like a bridge round, a bunch of other rounds. And then about 3 years ago we partnered up with a private equity group
Mhm.
that gave us, which basically bought out our VCs and gave us, a little bit more primary to continue building the business, but also gave us some M&A firepower. So
Yeah.
we made a
Wow.
couple of acquisitions, tucked them in, and those are, we're doing, sustained a yield, which is great. And yeah, I'd say one of the things that has been I'd say very interesting about our business is, yes, we've been early in this market, which I'd
Mhm.
say has somewhat limited the rate of growth that was available to us. And that was one of the reasons we moved kind of from venture to private equity, because the growth rate we were in was more consummate with what private equity investors were really interested in. Very consistent, predictable growth as opposed
Right.
to 500% a year growth or whatever. So, but what I'd say is, on the one hand, it's been very, very consistent growth. On the other hand, we've been somewhat rate limited in our growth based on the sort of size of our market. Now, I
Yeah.
think we're in a pivotal point in time now where that's actually changing, where the growth rates are starting to actually accelerate because the movement is starting to, I'd say, uh, sort of come to fruition, I
Because
guess.
no one can afford their healthcare.
I mean, like if you continue to compound something at 12%, eventually you get to functionally infinite. And that's what's happening to the traditional fee for service model. So, I mean, there's one example we saw where we had a group come to us through Hint Connect, an employer, and they were like, "Hey, we're actually getting a 20% increase next year." So our CEO basically just like, just try anything else. Like it was almost like out of desperation, like just I don't
Yeah.
care, like not that.
Yeah.
And so that coming to us from desperation is it's moving more now to actually I'm going to think about this from first principles. Like this is in my mind is like pretty obvious what the fixes to healthcare are. They just need to be implemented, but it's a big system. It takes time, right? And so
Well, I think there's also this mindset where if you have a universal healthcare system, people are used to just, it's provided for them, funded through taxpayer revenue. And they're used to going to the doctor. They don't think about it, right? When they got a problem, they go to the public health care. But whether it's better or worse or good or bad, I mean, that varies by issue, perspective, country, and so forth. But there's a mentality of, hey, when I'm sick, I'm just going to go. I think in the United States, because it's so unbelievably expensive, people don't go. And so they don't identify issues 10 years prior to where they're going to be. And it's a hard sell because, long term, that's where the long term impact is on healthcare, right? It's people doing the wrong things early because of lack of knowledge in many cases. And then that leads to this system where it's not preventative care, it's acute care, basically, and the care is not really to solve your problem. It's to help you it's managed care, right? We're managing your situation, not preventing it or solving it. So there's so many big picture issues, I think, in there
yeah,
that have to change over time.
for sure.
Yeah. And I know that what I do like about the concept, if I'm reading it correctly, is today we're always trying to balance. Well, I want to see this doctor, but he's not in network, but he's really, really great. And there's no one like him. So I'm going to just have to pay cash for that one and take it out of my HSA. For this one, I could go to Stanford. They're going to charge me $4,000 for an MRI, which will be covered 2,500, which will suck up my entire deductible. Or I can go to a lab and pay 550 in cash out of pocket. So it becomes like a secondary job that you have at night, trying to figure out how do I optimize these costs? It's so difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the like I'd say the general kind of premise of where we're heading to long term is the I mean, my favorite analogy for this is like when you crash, when you need to fill up your car, you don't submit a claim, right?
Right.
Most healthcare interactions cost less than the cost of filling your car up if you were to pay cash, or within a
Really? Wow.
reasonable order of magnitude. Like certain cars, it will cost $150 to fill it up, right? So, okay, maybe not exactly correct, but it's not like it's 10 times more to have a typical healthcare interaction than it is to fill your car up. It might be 1.5 times more or zero point 0.8 times the cost. So that,
Yeah.
I think for me that if you just to normalize, obviously we're not talking like very complex surgeries and things, but a lot of healthcare should just be a cash-based transaction. And
Yeah.
so the way I tend to think about it is the underlying thing we're trying to move towards is instead of 60 to 70% of healthcare being paid for by insurance fee for service, which is the way today. And that's, by the way, like that's including like all of the innovation on top of it, like value-based care and everything. That's just essentially like an abstraction layer on top of the fee-for-service chassis. That's the way I
Hmm.
tend to think about it. Instead of 60, 70, 80% covered by insurance, why not have insurance act more like other industries where it's 5 or 10 or 15% is covered by insurance, or maybe 20% is covered by insurance, and it's typically unpredictable, high cost events or medium to high cost events. Put that in insurance, and then everything else, which is predictable, predictable or low cost things that you could fund, then you're able to, then if you were to make that change, then and you create a free market where there's price transparency and competition, then you'll end up basically eliminating $1 trillion of waste and overspend and abuse and everything else.
Yeah.
That's kind of, and direct primary care is an avenue into that, right? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
because although primary care only represents 5 to 10% of spend, and fee for service it's 5%, and direct primary care it's more like 10%, because it is a bigger investment in primary care you're making.
Of your portfolio of expenses.
Yeah, like if you got $100,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's going to be 15% for that kind of stuff.
5 to 10% is actually primary care. Although that's the direct costs of primary care, indirectly, it's representative of something like 60% or 70% of spend because of the referrals that come out of primary care. So if you can fix that primary care layer, get the incentives right there, and then you can slowly but surely carve out more and more of the system and those referral pathways and renegotiate those contracts off of the fee-for-service chassis. And then the combination of both of those two things at scale, again, if you give everyone in America innovation,
Yeah.
then you end up in the realm of, okay, now you're going to eliminate over time, right, trillions of dollars.
I remember it must have been 10, 15 years ago. That was the thought that you could purchase a catastrophic insurance plan. And so that would cover you for the auto accident, the major surgery, that kind of thing. And then you would fund through cash, like primary care and other types of low cost pharmaceuticals and things of that nature. But when you look at the cost of the insurance programs, there's no catastrophic care. I mean, everything's just absurd. Even an HMO now is ridiculously expensive. So there really has to be some fundamental change.
Are, like deterministically going to continue on the path they're on, which is compounding. So there's
Yeah.
the only off ramp is like not that. Like you have to, like the off ramp can't be, in my mind, like let's just add more complexity to this system. It has to be something that is like
Simplified.
fundamentally.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus it's an area that is so difficult for the average person to really understand. I mean, it's a full-time job to grasp it and to figure out how to operate this. And then you combine the insurance side and some drugs are covered, some things aren't, some doctors not covered, dental's not, and chiropractor. It's just the whole thing is just a bloody mess, as we would say. I think starting with primary care is the best. And I've tried to do that, by the way.
But by the way, a lot of our doctors, like the type of stuff you've been talking about, where it's like, I want this, I want to do like the wellness or the wellness test, and a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff we were talking about before we got on camera. A lot of our customers actually do that as part of their service, where it's like maybe an add-on, where they say,
Well,
"Hey, listen, I'll be your primary care doctor, but if you want me to do all this other stuff, I'll work through that with you." And yeah, there's additional cost there, but you don't have to have multiple different doctors to help you with that. So yeah,
yeah.
if you, I would recommend that you just go look and, hey, is there a direct primary care doctor in my area? Go have a chat with them. Hey, this is the type of stuff I'm interested in, and they often will be very interested in following you down that path and helping support you, and it'll be
Well,
cost
I could
efficient.
do that because because I was one of the original, clients of Wellness FX, but I think for a lot of people, it's intimidating. They didn't even know the questions to ask. I could see that one day where the doctor could just, prescribe things off of a set, like, rate structure with, a well-known lab like LabCorp, and you could just manage that
I
pretty
think you'll be
easily.
surprised to
Yeah.
how many people actually really are interested in their health if only it was made
Yeah.
accessible to them. Like, I
Yeah.
think that's been one of the things that, is surprising somewhat is when you see just that the breadth of people that sign up to our customers. I mean, there's this one like really interesting. There's one of my favorite analogies is we have a customer who has his he literally has a homeless patient that's
Mhm.
homeless, and he has a scholarship for him where it's free or it's like really discounted, all the way through to there's a guy that like has a private jet, like a G4, and he's a member.
Wow.
And
That's quite
he'll
the range.
yeah, and so but and then everything in between, right? And so they're just like I think when you when you sort of decompose this healthcare into what it should be, and you give people access to the right way to do, especially primary care, and build that relationship, I think what you'll find is, a lot of the preconceived things around like people don't really care about their health, they're not really interested in it, whatever, like a lot of that falls away and you end up with people actually, yeah, people are interested and they do want to be healthy and they do want to be able to, deal with the stuff. They just don't want to be scared. They don't want to be blocked. They don't want it to be complex. They don't want it to bankrupt them. Like all the things you would expect, right? They don't want any of the bad stuff. They just want the good stuff. And if
Well,
you
I
can
think a
give
lot of
them
young
that,
a lot of
most people.
well, yeah, I think this innovation with wearables, like, like the ring and everything where you're basically tracking everything in your body, applying analytics, that mentality is driving people to want to become more healthy too and go to the doctor and figure out, what I need to do, what type of lab test should I take, what type of regimen should I be on, what type of supplements. So maybe it's Wellness FX coming of age, of course, 15 years later. Is there one big milestone that you guys are looking to hit that's going to get you to that next big level? Is there something, or are you going to just, like you said, you're with a PE firm, you've got a little bit of a war chest. So if you want to do acquisitions, you can do that. What's kind of the next big goal for you guys? And then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of the big goals was getting profitable, and we're pretty much there. So we sort of check that one
Congrats.
off the box. I would say, for us, it's sort of a boring answer, which is like we just want to keep executing and creating great value for our customers and continuing to grow consistently at the rates we're growing. At our scale, our growth rate is pretty like hard to do, right? To hold on to the rate we're growing is an
Yeah.
achievement. When we were much smaller, it was like whatever. But at our scale, having private equity type growth rates is actually an achievement. And so I think just continuing that and doing so in a sort of an efficient way where we don't lose sight of what's really valuable to us and like why we started the business. I think that's a big thing. There's some, unannounced big initiatives which I've been sworn that I won't publicly pre-announce to my product team. But there's some really exciting stuff that's coming online. Actually, the most excited I've ever been about our company from a product perspective is coming online. We'll be launching and announcing at the Hint Summit in April.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm going to need, that's going to be, let's say, there's some things need to go right for that to go well because we're taking a bit of a swing at a couple of things.
Well, as an original Midwesterner, the weather's pretty nice in Nashville in April.
I mean, we try to have, when we do these conferences, we try to make them like really fun. And
Yeah.
so, like a couple of years ago, we did Denver, like our after party was at Red Rocks, right?
Wow.
Which is pretty epic.
Yeah.
This year it's the
Of
Country
course.
Music Hall of Fame. We're having like actually live country music bands playing
Wow.
at the event. It's going to be pretty, I think you could show up as a random and you'd have a good time.
That's
But,
amazing.
but obviously, like, it's mostly it's, I'm
So
not
where do
sure I'd
people find
recommend
out
that.
about where do people find out about all these exciting things that are happening with Hint Health?
So our URL is hint.com, hint.com.
Great.
So you can kind of find everything from there. If you're interested in our conference, then it's just summit.hint.com. And if you're interested in anything else about the business, then you can just get it from our kind of main landing page. In the Hint Connect offering, by the way, the network, that's connect.hint.com.
Connect.
Yeah, a lot of your audience should go look at that. Like that's a real unlock. If you're not thinking about it, let me put it this way. If you're an HR advisor person or a benefits person at a company and you're not thinking about the strategy, then, if I was the CEO, I would be wondering why you're not, right? Like this stuff is, it's 5 or 10 years ago, you would have been cutting edge. Now we're starting to get into the, I think, realm of like, maybe this isn't right for us, but why haven't we thought about this
Yeah.
realm? And then soon, I think in the next 5 years, it's going to be table stakes. Like if you don't implement something like what we're talking about here, I just don't think you're just going to be behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, there's also the question of, do employees is the type of healthcare a major consideration when they take a job with a company?
Yeah,
And how does that work?
it is for sure. There definitely is an
Yeah,
employee angle, but I think
sure.
like what's more powerful is the cost of healthcare if you procure it and just go buy it from one of the bookers. Like if that's the plan, like that is a little bit like my favorite analogy on this dimension is the saying that used to be around like no one ever got fired for buying IBM.
Hmm.
Remember that saying?
Of
Well,
course.
actually, if you buy IBM now, like a certain, if you buy a on-prem thing and you're a startup,
Yeah.
right? Like you actually do get fired, right? Like the world's moved on, right? So I think of like Bookers in a similar thing. It's like, oh yeah, no, 5 years ago, if you buy United, right, and the cost went up next year, no problem. In 5 years, if you buy United without just thinking about it, or it's like you if you trade off United versus Cigna or something, like if that's what you're doing, then I would maybe like look for another job, right? Like
Well,
you're going to get fired. Like it's because the costs are, unless those groups have massive fundamental sort of self-disrupting innovations, right? Then like you just can't justify a 12% compounding rate of growth in costs, as well as the quality of that product is dropping at the same time. So it's just getting like very hard to justify a status quo decision for your employees.
well, I'm not going to fire myself, but our company does use United, and it has become very problematic.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah.
seeing that in the news. Obviously, there's been terrible things that happened to United and to their former CEO, but there's a lot of issues. And so I think everybody who,
Well, what my
yeah,
view on this is it's actually not their fault, right? It's like game theoretically, there's a role in game theory, there's like roles and there's players and there's outcomes. And they're just like playing the game that you would play if you were United. So it's not actually a criticism of them. They're actually an incredible business, like world class. The problem is that the system is broken and there's no, like in my mind, like in order for them to break away from the system, they'd have to destroy their business. So if
yeah.
I was the CEO of United, I would probably do most of the same things that they're doing, right? It's just that the
Well,
inevitability of it is that empires fall and the new guards will come in. And those businesses, like we know with certainty, all of these big businesses will one day not exist, right? Like that's just
sure.
sort of a deterministic thing. Like that's the status quo, right? That's normal. That's the normal thing to happen is for them one day to not exist. What I'm proposing is that that we're the pendulum is swinging the other direction, and that they're on their way out. It's going to take 2 decades, right? But that the United will not be the powerhouse it is today in 2 decades. It will either not exist or it'll be in a very, very, very different form factor. And it's not a criticism of the people at United. They're highly competent people, right? Building an incredible business. It's just not a business that is
Well,
serving the needs of the country right now.
well, I would say not to be discussed on this podcast, but I have several stories of which they're hastening their demand by what they're intentionally doing, unfortunately.
Yep.
There's some legitimate stories that are unfortunate. Yeah.
Right.
So, but anyway, I think every,
I think there is definitely abuse that's happening there.
yeah,
But I'd just say if there's 50,000 people that work at United, I'd say that 49,500 of them are probably just good people that are doing
of course.
a
Yeah.
good
Yeah.
job. And there's like 1% of them are evil or whatever, and that's just like normal in the
Well,
population. It's like it's just like the system is the problem, not
well,
United.
yeah, I agree with you. Look, people do not want people to not get good health care, but the cost within the ecosystem can be so great that decisions are made oftentimes that have downstream impacts are
And if you
just
take an
unfortunate.
individual person that's doing billing adjudication on the United side, their incentive is to be able to feed their family, and so they're going to take the protocol
Yeah.
where you need to look at the ways to deny the claim, and they'll follow the protocol, and that's the way that United makes money. And so,
Yeah.
so they'll just, and then they'll go home and feed their family, and that individual will be filled, right? Like so like it's not a judgment on that person; it's the system they're in,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
that is the problem. And so
Yeah.
it's actually a famous quote by Buckminster Fuller, which is you never change things by fighting the existing reality. You change things by basically building things, essentially recreating things from first principles or from scratch. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something like that.
Yeah. Well,
And you change the underlying reality as opposed to trying to fight it.
Well, Zach, I'm just happy that there are creative entrepreneurs out there like you who are trying to make a difference, and that'll flow downstream with better lives for ordinary people like you and I at the end of the day. And so thank you for tackling this massive problem, making a difference. And we look for more good things to come from Hint Health and you guys.
Appreciate it.
Cheers. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
The Startup Innovators podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you're interested in any of our executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.